Thank you for joining us. The story of Israel and the Jewish people and its capital Jerusalem has been one of exile, destruction, and rebirth. In its 4,000 years of history, Jerusalem has always been, along with the Torah, the cornerstone of Jewish life, as reflected in Israel's national anthem, Hatikvah. The hope of 2,000 years to live as a free people in our own land, the land of Zion and Jerusalem. Our guest today is Rabbi Yossie Denburg, who will share his views on Jerusalem and other important matters right after these messages and a video from Israel.
Healthcare costs are bankrupting America. The cause is federal overregulation. Unless a free market is restored, no one, including government, business, or individuals, will be able to afford the high cost of healthcare. My new book, Pharmocracy, exposes the corruption that causes needless suffering and death while our nation sinks into financial ruin.
This essential book is only $24, and you'll also receive a free subscription to Life Extension magazine. Get your book today.
The media often refer to a place called Arab East Jerusalem. Sometimes we are told that this is a city that was conquered by Israel in 1967, as if that is the only claim Israel has to the city. But let's take a few minutes for some honest reporting.
The term Arab East Jerusalem is not historically accurate. We have thousands of years of history of a single undivided city. Look back through all the various chapters in Jerusalem's past, and you will not find a time when Jerusalem was divided into east and west prior to the war with Jordan. We have archaeology, historical accounts, records that prove over 3,000 years of undivided Jewish existence here in Jerusalem. You can go to archaeological digs and find evidence of over 3,000 years of Jewish life. You can find places in the areas that are today called Arab East Jerusalem, where King David lived. The wall behind me is a part of the palace that King David lived in, and yet even the very existence of King David is today being questioned. The fact is, the division of Jerusalem into east and west only began in 1948 with the invasion of the Jordanian army, who erected walls here of concrete, barbed wire, and put in minefields. This division only lasted 19 years. We have eyewitness testimony from those whose families lived for generations in what is called Arab East Jerusalem, and who were expelled from their homes by the Jordanian army.
I was born in 1942 in Old Jerusalem. We were like 8 generations at that time.
I live in the old city. I am 6th generation of Rav Eliezer Bergman, who came to this place on the year 1835. We were evacuated from here, from the old city, with nothing. We only the clothes we wore. We had for many days, we had nothing. Our homes were left here with all the furniture, all our possessions. When we left the old city, we were refugees. The world knows about the Arab refugees of 1948. There were also Jewish refugees, and I was one of them.
The last day of the war, which was ceasefire, my grandfather brought the last water, and the Arab already were on top of the roof of the synagogue, and they killed him.
For 19 years, we could not get into the old city. our Jerusalem was divided in two. It's the first time in the history of Jerusalem that this city was divided.
In 1967, the Jordanians fled, Jerusalem was reunited and the walls torn down. Jews could once again return to their holiest places. Far from creating a new situation of occupation, the war re-established a status quo of an undivided city. Today, few people even know where the dividing line was. Thousands of Jews and Arabs cross the old dividing line every day without even realizing it. Jerusalem is a unified city, despite what the media would have you believe. Yet, with references to East Jerusalem as a separate geographical area, the media are supporting a historically inaccurate myth that undermines the legitimate Israeli claims that are backed by thousands of years of history.
The two-city narrative is a myth. It's a lie, and the media are responsible for carrying that core message of the delegitimization campaign against the State of Israel and Jewish residents in the land.
To refer to the city as if there are two distinct sides is wrong. What the media call Arab East Jerusalem is really where thousands of years of Jewish history took place. Don't let the media distort the real history of Jerusalem.
With us now is Rabbi Yossie Denburg. It's a pleasure to have you back on the show.
Thank you very much.
It's been a couple of years since I last had the pleasure of having you on the Shalom Show.
My fault or yours?
My fault, sir.
Okay.
My fault. We just saw this video on Jerusalem, and there have been quite a few presentations I've done in the past on the controversial subject surrounding the city of David and Solomon. What are your thoughts as to the significance of the city of Jerusalem in Jewish life?
First of all, I'm going to take issue with the word controversial. It's a controversy that has been made up. As you said, it's called the city of David. It was never called the city of Mahmud or Muhammad or anyone else. It was always a Jewish city. It was known to be a Jewish city. There's a tremendous amount of work going on top and under the ground to try to erase the Jewish connection to the city. But the controversy is like all other political controversies, completely blown out of proportion and designed by politicians to muddy the waters.
Speaking of muddying the waters, let's get controversial a little, and let me ask you, why is it that after the destruction of the temple...
First or second?
Well, I suppose the latest destruction of the temple, why is it that for some reason Islam built a shrine on top of the ruins of the great temple?
Okay, so the history of Jerusalem, specifically the Temple Mount, is that in the year 68 Common Era, after the Romans destroyed the Second Temple, built during the Second Commonwealth, begun under Ezra and Nehemiah, the Romans wanted to destroy any trace of the Jews and of a Jewish presence, and they renamed the city, and they kicked out the Jews, and they did everything they could to change the character of the city by covering up specifically those Jewish sites which were deemed holy to the Jews, and therefore they built their temples to Zeus and all of their other gods, specifically on the Temple Mount. Later, when the Christians, the Romans at that time, later became Christians, were kicked out by the Muslims wanted to destroy any Christian presence. The Muslims really were not, at that moment in history, thinking about how do we get rid of the Jewish presence. They actually were looking to overwhelm what was to them a Christian site. It just happened to be that the Christians had tried to overwhelm the Jewish site. That this place is deemed holy is no accident. I'm not sure how many of your listeners are aware of a very famous line amongst our sages that the place where the temple was built is the place from which Adam, the very first human being, was formed.
Rabbi, that's an interesting point. But I'd like to go elsewhere and ask you, is Jewish holy sites? I understand that there have been desecrations of other religious sites in the world. Tell us about that.
Every single creature, conscious or unconscious, has this need to go back to its source, to what it was consciously or unconsciously aware of at its first moment. You see, when people get very vulnerable and afraid, what do? They curl up into a ball as if they're still in their mother's womb. The fact that mankind, all of mankind, wants to go back to its point of origin, the place where Adam was built, is not interesting. that explains why every person is drawn towards Jerusalem. Richard, ask your people out there who are listening, ask the last time they went to Jerusalem and they did not see people at the Holy Wall from 90 different countries at one time. I was recently in Jerusalem and I met a group of people making a pilgrimage from New Guinea. New Guinea! And I said, what are you doing here? And there's these 30, 40 people that have been saving money for the last 20 plus years because they need to see the Holy Wall. Are you interested in Judaism? No. Are you interested in what the Holy Wall has to tell us from a Jewish perspective? No. It has meaning to them because they know that all of mankind is connected to this spot. They don't know why they're connected, but they know they are connected. It's not interesting. It's fundamental to explain the attraction of Jerusalem.
Now, Islam came into being 1700 years after Jerusalem was founded by David and Solomon. Interestingly, even though we're back to the word controversy, the name Jerusalem does not appear once in the Quran, yet over 700 times in the Bible. And until 1967, when they had access to Jerusalem, no Arab head of state ever showed any great interest in Jerusalem.
That is true.
So why now, all of a sudden?
As we said at the very beginning of the show, it's a political football field. Who has the best PR, who can claim access to Jerusalem today, controls the flow of people coming in and out of the city. It's amazing that this is still a question that's being asked after all of these years. Imagine what would happen if the Muslims controlled the holy city of Jerusalem, like they controlled the holy city of Mecca or Medina for them. What would happen to all the other religions that needed access to their holy sites? We all know. We don't have to spell it out. I do want to point out, if we have time, and I don't know if we do, the word Jerusalem, it's a combination of two Hebrew words. Yareh, Shalem. The word Yareh means fear of God. To stand in awe of the Almighty. Shalem means complete. This is the place where someone can find a completeness to their connection of God, of their faith, of their fear of God. That is not only demanded of Jews. That's demanded of all people. All people must recognize God. There is something palpable to anyone who seeks spirituality. There's something palpable about standing by that wall.
So why can't they live in peace? The Arab world is more expansive than the United States. They have more land than anyone, actually, just about. And they could easily build endless cities as they do in Dubai and elsewhere and settle their brother Muslims, so-called refugees, easily, as has happened many times in history with other people. Why do they insist on keeping them confined in refugee camps?
There is a phrase in the Bible, and no one's going to like what I'm going to say. When Ishmael, the father of the Muslim world, is described in the Torah as what his character would be, and the character of his people for all of time, the Torah uses two words. He will be a Pere Odom. The Arab doesn't want land, he wants your land. And that is why, unlike the Romans that we mentioned before, when they conquered other people's land, the Romans said, let me control the land, let me impose a new civilization upon every country that they conquered, whether it was Gaul, whether it was Britannia, it made no difference. They said, we will now impose the Roman ideals. The Arabs came into a country, just decimated it, took the wealth and never imposed anything. They don't want anything. They just want to destroy everything.
Boy, that certainly is a rather strong statement that will certainly annoy quite a few people. But you say what you feel you have to say, and I respect that. Rabbi, I'd like us to continue, but we have to pause for these messages. We'll be right back. We are back with Rabbi Denburg. Rabbi,
yes.
Politically speaking, people would ask, why would the Arab neighbors of Israel accept today what they refused to accept before 1967? We gave back Gaza, they would like the Golan Heights, they like Jerusalem, they would like the West Bank, Samaria and Judea. Why would they accept today and make peace when they didn't back in 1967?
I'm afraid that we really haven't spoken in a long time. You probably have forgotten everything I believe. Politically speaking, they will never accept a settlement. They're not looking for a settlement. This is a trump card. This is someone playing a game with our minds and our hearts. It's a psychological thriller over here, but I already know the end. It's not going to work out. It's not going to work out. No amount of sentiment is going to make these two people come to a peace. I promise you. Not in my lifetime. Unless the Messiah happens to right now and tomorrow, he will impose a peace. But these two people will not come to peace and will not come to terms. It's a pipe dream to think otherwise. We are wasting precious time trying to negotiate our existence away through peaceful methods.
Speaking of peace, how real a threat do you regard Iran to be today?
Tremendous. I am not a military expert, and you don't have to be to take Iran at its word. They do believe in holy war. They say that. They act on that. They've treated their neighbors, their own Muslim Arab neighbors, in a similar fashion. There's no reason to think that they would have all of a sudden some sort of change of heart when it comes to the Jews. No. If they could, they would destroy us. And I think we have to take that seriously.
Would you regard the 2006 war in which their proxies basically were attacking Israel from Lebanon, would you regard that as an example?
No, that's the coward's way of fighting. Send someone else to do your dirty work.
People would say that what we were talking about sounds very negative and pessimistic. Give me some optimism.
The reason why it sounded negative and pessimistic is because we're talking in the framework of politics. I can't think of anything more negative or anything more disheartening than politics. Instead of wasting our time and our energy trying to figure out how to mollify the Arab world, or even, may I say, the American world or the Western world, we should spend our time and our energy focusing on strengthening ourselves. And by the way, whenever Jews do that, you don't have to be optimistic. It's historically proven. When Jews have spent their time and energy on educating themselves, on strengthening themselves, we have had the most glorious of futures, starting from the times of King David on, actually.
Rabbi, give us something more specific.
There definitely should be some sort of national curriculum written in Israel that teaches our youth about the glorious days of Jewish history and what constitutes glorious days. You go something, in Germany, there was just recently a story in Germany that 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 6 young Germans have never heard the word Holocaust, Auschwitz. This is not 2,000 years. This is not 200 years. This is my parents' age. We in Israel have a similar dilemma when Ariel Sharon was asking his grandchild. Ariel Sharon is no representative of the Orthodox or the religious movement in Israel. Hardly. When Ariel Sharon was asking his kid about Ma'ariv, about the evening service, he said to his grandson, "Do you know what Ma'ariv is?" And his grandchild said, "The newspaper." And he said, "No, I mean the evening service." And this grandchild of this hero of Israel has no idea what his grandfather was talking about. If we are to have glorious days and they are just waiting for us, what we need to do is to strengthen our children's connection, not just to this physical land, but to the history of the land, why this land was promised, and what our job and our mission is upon this land, to create a government and a society which will be literally an Or LaGoyim, which will be a light unto the nations of how people live together, prosper together. There have been many models throughout history of how to create equality. Well, we talk about equality of votes. Everyone can vote. Is there equality in America? Hardly. There is not religious equality. There is not, the Muslims will tell you there's no religious equality, that they are sometimes maligned, and there's definitely not economic equality. Ask everyone who's against Romney or someone else. There is one way that everyone has equality. We are called the people of the book. Learning gives us equality. There's two kinds of freedoms. We in America talk about freedom, freedom of the press, freedom of religion. Judaism talks about another freedom, freedom from ignorance. God gave us the ability, the mitzvah to learn. Freedom from want. God gave us the mitzvah of charity, helping each other out. In America, we pursue the freedom of. We will never succeed. Judaism gives us the ability to pursue the freedom from. Everyone can succeed.
Rabbi, you once said, act locally, not globally. Is that
Act
what you said?
Act locally, think globally.
Okay, please explain that.
If we want to strengthen the Jewish world, instead of spending also time and effort on something which is beyond our means, strengthen your community. And before you can even strengthen your community, strengthen your family. Sit down with your child, depending upon their age. If they're a child of elementary school, buy them a book about Jewish history, a book of Jewish heroes, about people that have impacted not only our lives, the lives of every single person in the world. Because Jews have, in the most positive of all ways. If they are older, if they're teenagers, have a serious discussion with them. Say, do you have a Jewish hero? I can guarantee you that most Jewish teenagers today could not answer in the affirmative. They've never thought of having a Jewish hero. They've never identified with a Jewish hero. Create for your children, and then in your community, make a chavurah. If we act locally, if we strengthen our family, our community, with education for the young, education for the old, and education for everyone in between, for ourselves, you are going to notice a blossoming, a flowering of renewed interest in everything Jewish. All of a sudden, Jews in America, most of them who have never been to Israel, who have never seen Jerusalem, are going to say, I want to see Jerusalem. Are going to say, I want to be involved. There's a tremendous phrase when we put on tefillin in our Shema, Vishinantam levanecha. You shall teach this to your children. And I want to end off, if I can, with this message. About 3,500 years ago, God and we had an appointment at a little mountain called Sinai. And God said to the Jews, I would love to give you my Torah. I would love to give you my divine wisdom, wisdom of the ages, but I need a guarantee. And the Jews said, what about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, our forefathers, the patriarchs? They can guarantee for us. And God said, old hat, not going to work really. So they offered Moses, Aaron, the leaders of the Jewish people, the sages, the elders, and each time God said, no, not going to work. It doesn't suit my needs. It's not a guarantee. And finally the Jews said, we can guarantee the continuity of your message. Vishinantam levanecha. We will pass on what you've given us to our children. Our children will be our guarantors. And God said, let's sign now. This was true 3,500 years ago. And this is true even more so today, that the continuation of our people, locally, my family and your family, locally, Coral Springs or Nashville, Tennessee, and any other city, and then this American continent, and then the world, and in Israel, depends upon one thing and one thing only. We need to educate ourselves. Going back to a line, we are not called the people of the book because it's talking about TV guide. The people of the book means the Torah. Ki him chayenu v'orech yameinu. It is our life, and it guarantees the length of our days upon this world.
Rabbi, that's a wonderful message to end this discussion with, and I'd like us to do another one as soon as possible.
How about the next time we get together, we'll start off with a little Torah study.
Sounds like a good idea,
How about
Rabbi.
we actually learn Torah, you and I, on the show, so that instead of just the two of us benefiting, everyone else can, for 5 minutes, learn with us.
We should incorporate that in some of the shows.
We definitely should.
Thank you again, Rabbi. A real pleasure and an honor.
Thank you.
I'll be right back. This concludes our special show for today with Rabbi Yossie Denburg. I'm Richard Peritz. Thank you for being with us.